Have you scoured the classifieds lately and noticed that used Mercedes-Benz are actually relatively cheap? Well, yes, that is in fact the truth, and I've done the research, and there's 5 key reasons why that is. And as well, on top of that, yes, I still love mine.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
So speaking from experience, now I've got my 2018 model C300 right here, and yes, we're still loving it. We've had a great overall experience, minus a few kind of little problems along the way, but I can honestly tell you, the first major reason why used Mercedes-Benz are actually in fact quite cheap has to do with the fact that once a vehicle hits that 3 to 4 year mark, often the extended bumper-to-bumper warranty has expired and people fear the obvious: expensive after warranty repairs. For example, I mean, these cars now are turbocharged. We have a turbo 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, and like a lot of vehicles nowadays are utilizing that, producing more power, smaller engines, more efficiency, better fuel economy. That's why they're doing that. But if that turbo goes outside of warranty, you can expect to easily pay $2,000 to $3,000 for an update on that. Now, a little friendly hint for you. If you're driving a turbo car, 2 things: frequent oil changes, as well as, let's not forget to actually let the car properly warm up, and even more so cool down. If you're running hard on the freeway, pulling up to the driveway, give the vehicle a minute to actually cool down, then to turn it off. Otherwise, it's that hot oil that can possibly bake the bearings and result in a quick premature turbo failure. Other expensive parts are like electrics. For example, very expensive headlights arrangements. You can spend several $1,000s if one of these gets damaged. Of course, the front bumper is not a cheap part. And it wouldn't take much because that low riding bumper to actually scrape a curb and destroy that. Now, insurance usually covers that, but regardless, that's still a pricey part. Expensive wheels. And as well, you've got the display on the dash, and that can get expensive. If you lose pixels or that starts to fail, that gets pricey. We can talk about a few $1,000s for that. If you lose a gauge cluster on a Mercedes, it's guaranteed to be 2 to 3 times more expensive than it would be on a Toyota or a Lexus. We also had knick-knack issues like the speaker popped into the door cavity already in our ownership time, which appeared to have happened while we were driving it and hit a hard bump. All of a sudden that speaker's inside the door. Now, while it's in itself isn't necessarily expensive repair, could you imagine knick-knack problems like that, and you've got to then figure out how to get that door panel off? When you take the door panel off, that messes with possibly your window regulator setup. It just becomes a gross nightmare. Of course, the dealer did it for us. They fixed it up, but we had warranty. So out of warranty repair costs can get very expensive, because if I had to pay a dealer to do that, we're talking about $190 Canadian per hour labor just to fix up that speaker. So it could have cost an hour or 2 hours labor just to get that speaker re-put in if you can't figure it out yourself. And according to Repair Pal, you can expect your average C300 to have a cost that's about 50% more than your average Lexus for annual repairs. So clearly there is certainly a premium to be paid for a luxury German vehicle like the Mercedes C300. And the bottom line is, there's enough people out there, they do enough research, they know that some of these expensive repairs are imminent. And because of that, that sort of drives prices down a little bit. If you're looking for a used vehicle, a lot of times people are looking more for value, A to B, utilitarian. They aren't necessarily going for that style of vehicle, they just want something that's more reliable. So if you want that vehicle and you're searching for it, either you buy it new or you got to learn how to DIY some of those expensive repairs. So the second reason why they're actually cheap is because the expensive service intervals. And of course, what we're talking about, ever since 2009, Mercedes-Benz came out with a series of different schedules for your vehicle. Now, of course, we're talking about an A and a B. A schedule, you can expect minimum to cost you about $400 US. The B schedule, at least $800. That's if you're going with a lower grade vehicle. If you own one of the big twin turbo V8s or V12 cars, guaranteed it's going to cost you even more money. Of course, the A is good for about 10,000 miles or about a year, and the B is about 20,000 miles and about 2 years roughly on average. So pretty much every year you're doling out money hand over fist. That's if nothing's broken. And what do you actually wonder? What do you think you're getting for your money if you're talking A and B? You get an oil and filter change. They just check all your fluid levels. It's kind of a knick-knackety type of service. Tire inflations, they look and make sure they're not running flat. Brake components, what does that mean? That's pretty generic. Okay, pump the brakes, the car stops. In theory, it should be a lot more in depth. They'll probably do an inspection, make sure there's nothing hanging up, that there's no drag, and that your fluids are topped up with your brake fluid, and that everything is within spec in terms of your pad wear as well as your thickness of your rotors. Of course, there's also the maintenance monitor. They'll do a reset on that and get you back on the road as quick as physically possible. Now, I know from experience, the brakes on these cars are very, very squeaky. I was actually checking into the dealer there last year because my wife was complaining about squeaky brakes, so we took it in. And it was funny, while we were in there complaining about the brakes, there was another customer that had a service advisor out for a test drive on his own personal vehicle complaining about squealing brakes. And I asked the service people and they said, well, it's the type of pad they're using. They're a little harder pad to accommodate driving that's typically found on the Autobahn. While a lot of us North American drivers are A to B, 40 kilometers an hour, the fact of the matter is they build the car to similar spec, Europe and Canada, US. So technically, if you're doing 200k an hour, you want to be able to bring that car down to a stop or a standstill in short order. The brakes are capable of doing that. So therefore, they put in a little harder grade pad. You can expect some extra squealing out of these cars. There's also spark plugs and things like that that are not necessarily captured in the A and B and will cost you significant money down the road at some point. The sell, of course, is the all-inclusive service, because that's a trap, because the first few years you're going to be doing the A and B services. Often now they're packaging up with your vehicle and you're able to get that incorporated for free. But wait till the vehicle's 5 years of age. Not only are you doing those A's and B's and you're paying out of pocket, which you have to maintain your vehicle. I mean, any vehicle has to take a certain amount of maintenance. But again, as I said before, this dials back. All of a sudden, you're starting to see the more expensive maintenance, the differential transmission issues, spark plugs, coils, and of course, some repairs. And remember, like I said, you can't expect the costs of these cars to be 1.5, 2, 3 times more than your average comparative in the Japanese world from Acura or Lexus, for example. Now, that doesn't mean they're worse vehicles. That just means you've got to be aware of that. Well, and the third reason why you'll find used Mercedes quite cheap is now because it's a lack of monopoly. In other words, we're talking about the free world, and with that said, we have a great selection of other alternatives. Of course, the competition's strong. For example, Mercedes is just one of many different German brands. BMW has many offerings. Compared to this car, you can also get a 330, 430, you can get a 530, which is a mid-size sedan, and even you can step up to the 7 Series cars. Of course, you also have Audis, which generally have more all-wheel drive as standard. Other great competition, of course, are the Italian offerings from Alfa Romeo and Maserati, and of course, Jaguar is a great one, Land Rover, Range Rover in terms of SUVs. Step up a little bit, you can expect to pay a little more for a Porsche. Lexus and Acura are a great couple of options, although guaranteed they're not going to provide the same driving experience that you're getting from the Europeans. They certainly will provide you the additional offset reliability that some people just cherish and love and expect out of their used vehicle. And this goes for all European brands. Typically, they all face the same fate. High repair and service costs means that they hit a harder depreciation. And in other words, your average BMW, Mercedes, and Audi can expect to be only worth approximately 50% of its original value in the first 5 years. Another year and you'll find that's where they really trail off, and your average Mercedes can dip down as low as 40% of its original value in a handful of years if you've got the wrong model. So that doesn't mean that they're bad vehicles. That just means that as they get older, people are more fearful, but it actually represents potential great buying power for you as the consumer if you've got a great vehicle that's been well serviced, looked after, and well maintained overall. And the fourth reason why Mercedes-Benz are so cheap on the used car market is because they've sort of lost some of that brand identity. They've essentially become way too common, in other words. You could literally drive across town and see dozens of these vehicles on your daily commute. Whether you're talking about coupes, sedans, the C-Class is a very, very common and popular model. The A-Class is a cheaper class. Then you step into the E-Class. It's not until you get into the S-Class that you're starting to see some of the prestige. But the point of the matter is there's way too many variations covering every segment of the market. From subcompacts to compacts to mid-size, full-size sedans. Of course, we're talking coupes as well. How about SUVs, SAVs, sports cars, such as the AMG GT? There is literally a car for every single segment. So not only are they now stretching out to the luxury car buyer, they're actually trying to reach out to the non-luxury car buyer with cars like the CLA, GLA, or the A-Class cars. And now they actually represent a great purchase for somebody looking to get into Honda Civic type money, but carry actually a brand star like you see on the Mercedes there. But sadly, that's twofold. Of course, one side of it, it provides the opportunity for many buyers who never once dreamed of owning a Mercedes. But the flip side is it takes some of that brand credibility that once we all knew and loved, as well as the strength and durability of a lot of the Mercedes aren't quite what they used to be. If you dial back to the 70s and 80s, some of those cars were literally bulletproof and were built like a Sherman tank. And the fifth reason why used Mercedes-Benz are just so cheap has to do with the style of buyer. Now look at me. Oh yeah, I'm strutting like a peacock because I was able to buy my 2018 Mercedes. But the reality is we bought it used. And that's what a lot of people find where the best value is. But that's not always going to happen. Who can actually afford to buy an S-Class brand new? Obviously lawyers, doctors, senior executives of large corporations, and other people that just find money a lot easier to come by often step into the new cars. For example, new S-Class, new E-Class, and of course some of the other cars, for example, the AMG C-Class cars or AMG GTs, as well as some of the upscale SUVs. A lot of people can't afford to dole out $150,000 for a car. A lot of people can't afford to spend $80,000 on a car. But that's Mercedes bread and butter. So those are the people that are typically well-heeled, able to buy a new Mercedes. Well, what do you think happens after it's 3 years old? It's still a pricey car. So now you're taking, say, a $150,000 S-Class, and it's used, even at 50%, that's still 75 grand. Who on God's green earth has that kind of money to throw $70,000 or $80,000 at a 5-year-old Mercedes S-Class with 90,000 kilometers on it? Well, it's not those VPs or doctors or lawyers. No, but it's not also the boy next door or your son or your daughter. They don't have that kind of money, and quite frankly, they often wouldn't qualify for a loan from the bank either. So it basically leaves those types of cars, those really expensive Mercedes S, E-Class, premium SUVs, far too expensive, even on the used car market, to flip. Not to mention, they're not as cool to drive. So a lot of the younger buyers don't want a big E-Class car. They'd rather go with a C-Class. But a lot of times, what that does is it sort of hampers the value of a lot of these cars. It pushes them down to where all of a sudden they become more appetizing. You know, a dealer winding up with a 5-year-old S-Class on the lot, they can't sell it. They literally have to let it go at 30 grand, which is probably a fifth of its original value, to a buyer that is more likely to afford 30 grand. So the bottom line is, there's a much smaller niche market of buyers that are able to actually afford a used Mercedes, and therefore prices stay low. And with all of that said, hey, maybe you're done with Mercedes, maybe you just want something different. How about a BMW right there? 5 reasons why BMWs are so cheap on the used car market. Hope to see you real soon. Catch you then. Bye-bye.